All right, let's just jump right into this because this is a truly jarring contrast. Between 2005 and 2022, Canada's overall national emissions actually dropped. They fell by 7%. But in that exact same window of time, emissions from the oil and gas sector went up by 11%. It is a massive, incredibly complex policy challenge facing one of Canada's biggest economic engines, and honestly, it sets the stage perfectly for exactly why we are here today. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be unpacking a really fascinating policy document put together by Engineers Beyond Borders Global, or EBG. Their report is all about climate change and Canada's oil and gas industry, but what makes it so compelling is the angle. It's a very pragmatic, engineering-driven attempt to find a real path forward. Bridging the gap between those big national climate commitments and the ground-level reality of this massive industry. So here's how we're going to break this down today. First, we'll look at the unfinished Senate study. Second, immediate regulations and caps. Third, we'll weigh technology against human capital. And finally, the implementation roadmap. Starting off with Section 1, the unfinished Senate study, and where all this data actually comes from. So picture this. Between 2022 and 2024, the Standing Senate Committee on Energy, the Environment, and Natural Resources gathered an absolute mountain of expert testimony and data. But then, in February 2026, the committee just stopped. They decided not to pursue the study further, meaning they never issued any final recommendations. Enter EBBG. They essentially said, okay, we'll take it from here. They took that huge public evidentiary record and independently synthesized it into the policy recommendations we're diving into today. To be clear, there's no new primary research here. It's just a pure distillation of the experts who already testified. Now, pulling from all that data, what is the ultimate goal here? Well, it's definitely not a blind, reckless dash to just cut carbon at all costs. It's a tightrope walk. The objective is to align the sector with a credible path to net zero by 2050, absolutely, but while simultaneously keeping high productivity economic activity alive, supporting the workers and regions affected, and keeping Canada's status as a reliable energy supplier. Basically, it's about transition without destruction. Moving into Section 2, immediate regulations and caps. Let's look at the immediate needs. Okay, wrap your head around this number, 52%. Based on data out of Alberta, they've actually seen reductions of up to 52% in methane emissions since 2014. EBG really hammers on this to prove a crucial point. Methane abatement, it's not some experimental pie-in-the-sky concept. It is a highly mature, high-confidence strategy. The tech works. It's cost-effective. And accelerating it is flat-out the best way to close the emissions gap right now, while the more futuristic technologies are still maturing. So to actually scale that success, EBBG pulled 3 priority actions from the evidence. Number 1, enforce federal rules targeting a 75% reduction below 2012 levels by 2030. Number 2, aggressively expand support for finding and fixing leaks. And number 3, electrify upstream operations and upgrade process efficiencies. These are your near-term, highly effective actions that deliver absolute emissions drops. But here's the thing. Fixing methane leaks alone isn't going to turn the whole ship around. The report tackles the need for an emissions cap, and they pull some pretty blunt testimony from the public record to back it up. Simon Dyer from the Pamina Institute testified, quote, companies have shown they will not do so voluntarily. Absolutely, we need a cap on oil and gas emissions because no other policies have actually driven the kind of behavior that is necessary. He added, it is just math. Oil and gas emissions are not decreasing. The report uses this to impartially lay out exactly why a federally mandated constraint is on the table. Now, here is an absolutely crucial distinction the report makes. Policy needs to cap absolute emissions, not production. Why does that matter to us? Well, because a smart, technology-neutral cap creates predictable rules for investors. It tells the industry exactly what their total carbon limit is, but lets production volumes shift naturally with global demand, just as long as they stay under that strict emission ceiling. All right, Section 3, technology versus human capital. How do we actually balance the two? You hear a lot about carbon capture, or CCUS, like it's this magic silver bullet for the climate crisis. But the Senate record, it suggests we need to be a lot more cautious. Simon Langlois Bertrand from the Trottier Energy Institute warned the committee that relying purely on CCUS to bail out any sector carries an, quote, extremely high risk of failure. The report notes that, yes, carbon capture is technically possible, but it is incredibly capital-intensive and historically, it's kind of underdelivered on its promises. So the takeaway is that public support for carbon capture has to be incredibly targeted. The recommendation is to only deploy it where you have high geologic storage potential, a tight cluster of industries, and high-purity CO2 streams, which in Canada mostly means the oil sands region. Plus, it needs incredibly strict independent monitoring. Basically, don't just throw it at everything and hope it works. So, if the tech isn't a guaranteed silver bullet, what is Canada's ace in the hole? Surprisingly, it's the people. Take a look at this. David Dodge's testimony highlighted labor productivity per person. The manufacturing sector, it sits around $70. But in the oil and gas sector, a staggering $220. That is a massive difference, and it totally flips the script. EBGB argues we shouldn't view this hyperproductive workforce as some liability tied to the past, but as a strategic, highly valuable national asset that we desperately need for the future. Think about it. The competencies built up in oil and gas, process engineering, complex project management, geoscience, heavy instrumentation, these are literally the exact brains required to build the low-carbon economy. These skills seamlessly transfer over to hydrogen, geothermal energy, industrial electrification, you name it. The report is screaming for proactive transition planning and skills mapping right now so we can pivot this incredible talent pool into the industries of tomorrow. Which brings us to Section 4. The implementation roadmap, executing the actual plan. Before we talk timelines, let's zoom out and look at the big picture. When you look at the entire life cycle emissions of a barrel of oil, the extraction and processing part, that's only about 10 to 15% of it. A whopping 85 to 90% of the emissions happen at the tailpipe, when the fuel is actually combusted. And because Canada exports so much of its energy, the emissions from the fossil fuels we send overseas have actually exceeded our entire domestic carbon footprint in some years. Let that sink in. Now, sure, international accounting rules point the finger at the importing country, not Canada. But EBBG argues you can't just stick your head in the sand. Canada's long-term market access and credibility really depend on owning and transparently reporting this full global picture. To actually manage a transition this complicated, the report relies on a concept called adaptive management. Because you can't just set a target in 2030 and cross your fingers, right? First, we need way better facility-level data that is independently verified. Second, we need periodic, highly public progress reviews. And third, this is the big one, we have to actually adjust policies based on observed performance. If a fancy new tech isn't working the way the brochure promised, the system needs to catch it early and pivot immediately. So how does this blueprint actually roll out in the real world? Let's walk through the timeline because it really ties this whole explainer together. Near term, so the next 1 to 3 years, the total focus is on locking in those methane rules, finalizing the emissions cap, and mapping out workforce skills. Medium term, years 3 to 8, we see the rollout of high-confidence carbon capture projects, tightening that emissions cap, and real regional diversification. And long term, 8 years out and beyond, it's all about adaptive management as global demand shifts and moving all that brilliant technical talent into low-carbon roles. Which leaves us with this final million-dollar question to chew on. Can Canada's policies adapt to observed performance before it's too late? Based on the public Senate record, EBBG makes a pretty compelling case that the tools, the technology, and especially the human talent are absolutely already there to manage this. But it all comes down to execution, verification, and having the guts to pivot when the data demands it. It is a deeply complex issue, but a fascinating engineering perspective. If you found this breakdown insightful, I highly encourage you to go explore the public Senate evidentiary record for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.